Morning, everyone. Let's take a look at some updates as it relates to the ongoing war between Israel and Hamas. I'm recording this at 8:30 a.m. Central Time on Friday, October 13th, 2023. So by the time this video comes out in a few hours, or by the time you watch it, events on the ground might be different. Now, the Israeli Defense Force put out their daily situational update. In that, they say that 1,300 Israelis have been killed, more than 3,200 wounded, and 120 families have been notified that a family member is currently being held hostage by Hamas. That last number, all these numbers continue to increase as bodies are discovered, but that last figure has jumped up substantially. The original, I believe, was around 50 families notified that someone was being held hostage. That jumped up to 90, and overnight appears to be at 120 now. The report continues saying that more than 6,000 rockets have been fired from Gaza, which is an increase over the last few days. And then officially, the IDF says that 2,687 targets have been struck in terms of the aerial campaign. That number is not accurate. That is the same number they put out 24 hours prior. And over the course of the last day, there was a pretty significant bombardment in Gaza. So the jump from 2 days ago to yesterday was around 400 additional targets struck. I saw one report that said 750 additional targets struck over the past 24 hours. That sounds about right, just based off some of the footage that was coming out. It was nonstop for a long period of time. The Gaza Health Ministry is reporting that 1,417 Palestinians have been killed since the aerial bombardment has kicked off, and I've seen as many as 7,000 reported as wounded. But in full disclosure, it's very, very hard to dial in that information right now. So the Gaza Health Ministry and Hamas are putting out their numbers, and Israel is putting out a number of targets struck. Israel is not providing, from what I've seen, battle damage assessment from these strikes in terms of enemy combatants killed or possible civilians killed with collateral damage. So kind of two different metrics we're going off of. And it's, again, just very, very hard to independently verify the casualty figures inside of Gaza as of today. Now, according to the Washington Post, the Sol power plant in Gaza has run out of fuel and is no longer functioning. Prior to this siege and bombardment, it was only running for a couple hours a day, so it already wasn't good. Now that appears to be completely shut off. This same Washington Post report says that 9 United Nations staffers have been killed by Israeli airstrikes or through this aerial campaign, adding that 13 health facilities have been hit and that all hospitals are under severe strain. Again, no materials, no supplies coming in, now without power and without water. They add that all crossings in and out of Gaza are completely sealed off, nothing new there, and that 265,000 people have been displaced, or roughly 13% of the total Gaza population. Again, displaced internally, they're not able to leave that area. I have seen that number creep up north of 300,000 in some reports. It's a substantial figure, however you look at it. Now, in terms of the scope of the bombing campaign that we've seen so far, I don't want to overplay this, but it is, in a sense, something we haven't seen in a long, long time. So the Israeli Air Force says that they have dropped 6,000 bombs so far, just in the span of less than a week, which is a staggering amount for an area that's just 140 square miles. Again, going back to the Washington Post, Mark Garlasco put out some statistics as a comparison here, saying that the United States dropped 7,423 bombs in Afghanistan. That was the highest amount we dropped in 1 year in Afghanistan. So 7,400 U.S. bombs dropped in Afghanistan across an entire year at its peak, compared to 6,000 bombs dropped just in Gaza in 1 week. That's staggering. Additionally, some more context here. The entire war in Libya, the U.S. and NATO allies dropped around 7,600 bombs across that entire campaign, across the entire country. And then against the Islamic State, during the Islamic State campaign, the United States and allies dropped between 2,000 and 5,000 bombs per month, 2,000 to 5,000 per month, across all of Iraq and Syria. Now, it wasn't those entire countries that were involved. It was just a swath kind of running between the two. But still, up to 5,000 bombs per month across that major area, compared again with 6,000 bombs dropped in the small area that is Gaza. Just to go back to the casualty piece here, the figures are very hard to come by right now. And with that volume of strikes, collateral damage is impossible to avoid. Just there's no other way to put it. There 100% will be, in that dense of an area with 6,000 bombs dropped, there are civilians being killed. There's just no two ways around it. Now, the Israeli Defense Force put out an announcement for all civilians to leave Gaza, which is believed to be ahead of what most expect to be a ground offensive here in the coming days. They put out that notice just before midnight local time last night. I've seen some reports say that they gave a 24-hour deadline. I didn't see that in the actual IDF announcement, but it's one of those things being reported by enough outlets. I can't tell if I just missed it or if that's been added after the fact. Now, the United Nations has come out and said that that's impossible to do. It's talking about 1.1 million people moving out of a very small area with limited routes in and out in the midst of a bombardment campaign. And the United Nations is saying that that could lead to a significant humanitarian crisis, which it's an area under siege. It's already a humanitarian crisis. It'll be interesting to see what Israel does with this. Now, Hamas, reportedly, on the other side, is calling this evacuation request a psyop and is urging people to stay in place, saying that it's just Israel trying to bully the people of Gaza. You know, there's a very good reason. We've done this in the United States in battles like Fallujah and in Marja in Afghanistan, where an announcement went out ahead of time saying, this is your chance. Civilians, leave the area. The military's coming in. And then it kind of opens up, for lack of a better term, a free fire area, saying if anybody that remains behind in this sector is now considered an enemy combatant. 24 hours is a very short period of time to get everybody out. And of course, it's far from perfect, right? There's going to be people that don't hear that announcement. There's going to be people that hear that and decide to stay that have no intentions of doing any fighting, and others who maybe can't leave, right? So it's this is all shaping up to be, should Israel go in on the ground, which I believe they will. I don't think there's another way around this. If they truly want to eliminate the threat that is Hamas, it's going to be a very nasty fight. It's going to be a long, bloody fight. Now, there has been an increase in violence in the West Bank, which has not been as much at the forefront as Gaza has been. The major military operations are going to be taking place in Gaza. There is a military presence in and around the West Bank. What we've seen over the last few days, it's mixed reporting. It's not getting nearly as much coverage as the events in Gaza, understandably so. But there have been reports coming out of Israeli settlers attacking Palestinians in the area. It really feels like that doesn't look like it will be at the size and the scope of what we're going to see in Gaza, not by a long shot, but it potentially leads to a situation where Israel right now is able to really solely focus their military power in Gaza. It might open up a situation where they have to put more troops and more of a focus in the West Bank as well. And of course, remember, there's still concerns about Hezbollah joining the war from the north, and sordid reports of munitions being fired from Syria. And just yesterday, Israel attacked a few airfields in Syria designed to stop the arms shipment to some of the Iranian-backed militias in that country that could use those arms then to attack Israel and open up yet another front. So Israel is they're in a tough spot of trying to contain this fight just to Gaza, recognizing that there's a few other areas they could come into contact. Now, there were some interesting reports coming out on a Telegram channel yesterday called South First Responders. They were sent pictures of captured documents from some of the killed Hamas terrorists in Israeli territory. So after the cleanup, there were, again, upwards of 1,500 terrorists killed. And those bodies were searched, and there was intelligence gathered from that. My understanding is some of that intelligence was then used to carry out certain raids and strikes to target some of the Hamas leadership. But what the South First Responders put out here was an interesting breakdown from a few of these sheets. They laid out battle plans, kind of a timeline of how this attack would take place. The plans broke things out into, one said that there would be a commander in charge of 2 groups of 5 soldiers. They broke it out between folks whose responsibility was to breach a hole in the fence, whereas others would be part of an assault group, others responsible for artillery. Artillery in that sense probably means mortars, not howitzers, as we usually associate with artillery. That's not a capability that Hamas has. Those reports also, or these Hamas documents also stated that they believed 1,000 civilians would be in the kibbutz targeted, and they knew that Israeli response time would be between 3 and 5 minutes, and said that their mission was to, quote, take prisoner soldiers, residents, and take hostages for negotiations. Now, there are a lot of other aspects. This was in the United States, we call it an operations order, like a significant planning document to execute some sort of operation like this. Usually, we don't take those into battle with us because of this exact issue. If a soldier's fallen, captured, or whatever it might be, those fall in enemy hands, it gives significant insight into your planning. That appears to be what happened here. Now, finally, Human Rights Watch confirmed that Israel has been using white phosphorus so far during the ongoing strikes in Gaza and near the Lebanon border. Now, white phosphorus, pretty nasty type munition. It burns at around 1,500 degrees Fahrenheit. It is not illegal. The use of white phosphorus is not illegal. We have white phosphorus in our arsenal. We have used white phosphorus extensively recently in wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. White phosphorus can be used for smoke. So it can be used to lay down a smoke screen to obscure enemy observation or to obscure friendly movement. But it also can be used for incendiary purposes, given the fact that it burns 1,500 degrees. There is a prohibition, international prohibition, against using these against civilian targets. Now, I know that sounds kind of silly, like you shouldn't be able to use any weapons against civilian targets. I got it. But the differentiator here is that incendiary munitions specifically are permitted against military targets and military infrastructure. Now, unfortunately, there's a little bit of a loophole here in Protocol 3 of the Convention on Conventional Munitions, which applies to incendiary munitions. What they talk about in that convention is that it's specific to weapons that are primarily designed to set fires, incendiary type munitions. Technically, as I mentioned just a moment ago, white phosphorus or Willie Pete can be used as a smoke munition. So there are arguments that Willie Pete does not fall into this incendiary munition ban. Either way, even if the intended purpose is for smoke, you just have to be so careful about not using these in an area where civilians are present. Just the incendiary properties can be so horrific. And as of now, it looks like that aspect of this conflict, among others, is something that the Human Rights Watch is continuing to monitor. But that's all I got for now. Again, if interested in general national security subjects, be sure to check out the sit reps I put out on Substack. Link is in the description below. Thanks for watching. I'll see y'all next time.